Mr. Netanyahu, I address you today as a leader of a nation that has witnessed both struggle and resilience. But above all, I speak as a representative of the African people, whose voices have often been disregarded, whose struggles have too often been ignored. As you sit at the helm of Israel, a country built on the very values of survival and resistance, I must remind you of one crucial truth. The world is watching, and history is unfolding in real time. For too long we have witnessed the consequences of decisions made far from the continent, decisions that have sowed division, instability, and conflict. The people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, are not abstract figures in your policy meetings or chess pieces in a geopolitical game. They are human beings, deserving of dignity, justice, and peace. Your actions have repercussions far beyond the borders of Israel, and the eyes of the world are upon you. I come to you today with a simple message. This is your last warning. The continued escalation of violence against the Palestinian people, the expansion of settlements, and the denial of basic rights will not be tolerated. The people of Africa, the people of the Arab world, and countless others who have experienced oppression are watching closely, and we will no longer remain silent in the face of injustice. Your actions not only violate the rights of Palestinians, but also undermine the principles of international law, peace, and respect for human dignity. We are in an era where borders are being redrawn, not with lines on a map, but with the power of collective will. The world is shifting, and the actions of one nation, no matter how powerful, cannot ignore the will of the many. You may believe that the status quo will continue, that the pressure from international voices will eventually fade. But know this, African nations will no longer be silent partners in this hypocrisy. You can no longer expect to enjoy the silence of a continent that has known its own struggle for liberation. The people of Africa stand in solidarity with the oppressed, and we will hold you accountable for the suffering you inflict upon the Palestinian people. I urge you, Mr. Netanyahu, to reconsider the path you are on, to take a step back and realize that no matter how powerful a nation may appear in the short term, it is the moral arc of history that bends toward justice. You must know that the longer you continue down this road, the more difficult it will be to reverse course, and the more isolation you will face, not just from the nations of Africa, but from a world that increasingly rejects violence and oppression. This is not just about Palestine, it is about the principles that define humanity itself. It is about standing on the side of justice, of peace, and of respect for all people. The time for empty rhetoric and continued aggression has passed. The people of Africa, and indeed the people of the world, will not stand idly by. This is your final warning, Mr. Netanyahu. We will not let this injustice persist. The time for real change is now. The situation in Palestine today is a reflection of a broader crisis of justice, one that resonates far beyond the borders of the region. The actions Israel has taken, ruthless violence, illegal settlement expansion, and systematic violations of basic human rights have gone on for far too long. The world has remained silent for decades, but that silence is no longer acceptable. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and as leaders, as human beings, we are all bound by the moral responsibility to speak out and act. The violence unleashed against the Palestinian people has become a grim, almost predictable pattern. It is a cycle that perpetuates suffering, hardship, and death. Each new offensive from the Israeli military leaves behind broken bodies, shattered homes, and the people who continue to endure unimaginable pain. The international community for too long has stood by, offering little more than empty condemnation or diplomatic gestures that have no real weight behind them. How many more lives must be lost before the world wakes up to the reality that this is no longer just a political issue but a moral one? The children of Palestine, who have known nothing but war, deserve a future without the shadow of fear. They deserve to grow up in a world where they are not treated as collateral damage in the broader geopolitical game. The expansion of illegal Israeli settlements on Palestinian land is another gross violation of international law that has continued unabated. These settlements, built on land that was never Israel's to begin with, are a blatant attempt to erase Palestinian presence from their own land. Every settlement built is an assertion of control, a denial of the Palestinian right to self-determination. Every settler who moves into these areas does so on land that has been forcefully taken from its rightful owners, further undermining the possibility of peace and coexistence. The creation of these settlements is not merely a political maneuver, it is an act of aggression. It sends a clear message that the rights of Palestinians to live in peace, to live on their own land, are irrelevant in the eyes of those who continue to violate their sovereignty. Palestinians live under a brutal occupation, one that restricts their movement, limits their access to basic resources like clean water, food, and medical care, and makes everyday life an exercise in survival. The checkpoints, the walls, the constant surveillance, these are not the hallmarks of a people committed to peace. These are the tactics of an occupying force determined to maintain control at any cost, regardless of the human toll it exacts. How many more Palestinians must suffer from being unable to travel to work, to visit family, or to access the health care they need? How many more must live under the constant threat of arrest or imprisonment for simply existing in their own home? The occupation is not just a political arrangement, it is a daily assault on the dignity of an entire people. The world can no longer turn a blind eye to the systematic violations of Palestinian human rights. This is not about two nations locked in a bitter rivalry. It is about one nation imposing its will upon another, with little regard for the humanity of the people it subjugates. Every act of violence, every settlement that goes up, every restriction placed on the movement of Palestinians, and every life lost is a testament to the failure of the international community to uphold the principles of justice. The United Nations, human rights organizations, and global powers have all failed to act decisively in holding Israel accountable for its actions. The time for vague resolutions and diplomatic niceties has passed. The actions of Israel cannot be allowed to continue without consequence. The people of Palestine are not seeking vengeance. They are seeking justice. They are asking for the most basic of human rights, the right to live in peace, to live in dignity, and to live free from the threat of violence and oppression. They do not seek to destroy Israel, but to live alongside it in a just and peaceful world where both peoples can thrive. The solution lies not in further division, but in reconciliation, in a commitment to human dignity, and in the restoration of basic rights to those who have been denied them for far too long. Injustice cannot persist in the name of national security, nor can it be justified by claims of self-defense. The Palestinian people have been under siege for decades, their homes destroyed, their livelihoods shattered, and their very existence marginalized. The international community must recognize that there is no peace without justice. No genuine peace can be established while one people is oppressed and deprived of their most basic rights. The world must demand that Israel end its violent campaign against Palestinians and begin the process of recognizing their right to exist freely, with dignity and self-determination. It is time for the international community to hold Israel accountable for its actions. There must be consequences for the continued violation of Palestinian rights, and for the expansion of settlements that undermine the possibility of a two-state solution. The world cannot continue to accept the status quo, one where Palestinian lives are deemed expendable and their rights are denied. If we are to stand for justice, we must stand with the oppressed, and in this case, that means standing with the Palestinian people in their quest for freedom. This call for justice is not just for the Palestinians, it is for all of humanity. The principle of justice cannot be selective. It cannot be conditioned on political alliances, economic interests, or the power dynamics of the international order. Justice must be universal. It must transcend borders and political affiliations. When one people is oppressed, the entire world is diminished. The fight for Palestinian rights is not just a Palestinian fight. It is a fight for the dignity of every human being on this earth. The world has reached a breaking point. No longer can we sit idly by while injustice continues unchecked. No longer can we allow the forces of oppression to carry on as they have. It is time for change. And that change must come through the collective will of the people. Governments, organizations, and individuals alike must unite in demanding that Israel cease its violence, dismantle its illegal settlements, and recognize the rights of the Palestinian people. We must stand firm in our commitment to justice, For it is only through justice that true peace can be achieved. The time for inaction has passed. The time for justice is now. Africa has long been a continent that has known the sting of oppression, from colonial rule to the internal conflicts and struggles for freedom that have shaped our modern history. We know what it means to be marginalized, to be denied our dignity, and to see the powerful trample upon the rights of the weak. Our past is one of struggle, but it is also one of resilience and strength. Africa has fought hard to free itself from the shackles of colonialism, and those lessons have not been forgotten. The scars of our past have not faded, but they have hardened into a resolve that will no longer allow us to turn a blind eye to injustice, no matter where it occurs in the world. It is no longer enough to be passive observers while the rights of other peoples are violated. We cannot afford the luxury of silence, for we know all too well what it means to be oppressed, what it means to see your people subjugated and your land taken from you. The African spirit is one of unity, and we cannot claim that unity for ourselves while ignoring the suffering of others. Whether it happens in our own backyard or on the other side of the globe, oppression is an affront to every African heart. When we speak about the African stand, we are speaking of a continent that has lived through centuries of foreign domination and internal struggles. We understand the value of freedom, the price of independence, and the struggle to maintain dignity in the face of overwhelming odds. This is why Africa will no longer be a passive bystander when it comes to the plight of the Palestinian people. Our history compels us to act. Our past, steeped in the legacy of liberation movements and the fight for justice, demands that we rise in solidarity with those who are being denied their basic human rights, wherever they may be. We as Africans have always stood for the liberation of oppressed peoples. From the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa to the independence movements across the continent, Africa has never backed down from standing on the side of justice. It is part of our identity. We know what it is like to be pushed to the margins, to be exploited for our resources, to be silenced in the face of overwhelming power. But it is precisely because we have lived through this pain that we are uniquely positioned to understand the suffering of the Palestinian people. We understand the feeling of dispossession, of living under the shadow of foreign domination, and of having your humanity denied. As Africans, we cannot and will not turn our backs on those who are suffering in Palestine. We know the consequences of remaining silent in the face of injustice. We saw it in our own struggles where the world watched for decades as we fought for our freedom. And we will not stand by now watching the Palestinian people endure the same fate. The African voice is a powerful one, and it will be heard. We will not allow those who oppress the Palestinian people to continue their actions without facing the consequences. The time for indifference has passed. The time for action is now. In the past, Africa has often been ignored when it comes to global politics, as if our struggles, our voices, and our concerns are secondary. We have been told that we should mind our own business, that our priorities are not as important as those of the more powerful nations, but this is no longer the case. The African continent is rising, and our voices are being heard louder than ever before. We are no longer content to let others dictate our course. The struggles of the Palestinian people are now our struggle, as their oppression is an affront to everything we stand for. The time has come for us to make it clear that Africa will no longer be passive in the face of injustice. Our leaders, our people, our youth, all of us must stand in solidarity with Palestine. We will use our voices, our influence, and our power to demand justice. We will support the Palestinian people in their quest for freedom, dignity, and self-determination. We will not allow their plight to go unheard or unchallenged. Africa has always been a land of struggle, but it has also been a land of triumph. We have overcome the forces of colonialism, and we will stand with the Palestinian people as they fight for their own freedom. The African stand is not just a statement of solidarity, it is a call to action. We will use every avenue available to us, diplomatic, economic, and social, to bring attention to the Palestinian cause and to push for real, meaningful change. The African Union, the Pan-African Parliament, and all our regional and continental bodies must take a firm stance against the injustice faced by the Palestinian people. We cannot afford to be passive observers. We must use our collective strength to hold Israel accountable for its actions. Furthermore, Africa must leverage its position on the global stage to raise awareness about the situation in Palestine. We have the ability to influence international opinion, to shape the conversation, and to rally the support of other nations that stand for justice. By uniting as one voice, Africa can bring the issue of Palestine to the forefront of global discourse. The struggles of the Palestinian people are not isolated. They are part of a larger struggle for justice, for the rights of all oppressed peoples across the world. The African stand, therefore, is not just about Palestine. It is about the principle of justice itself. We must also ensure that our actions go beyond words. Words are powerful, but they are only meaningful when backed by concrete actions. Africa must cut ties with those who support the oppression of the Palestinian people. We must consider economic and diplomatic measures that will compel Israel to end its occupation and its violations of Palestinian rights. Our resources, our trade, our alliances. These are powerful tools that we can use to hold Israel accountable for its actions. It is time for Africa to stop being afraid to use these tools in defense of justice. The African stand is a call to all nations to join us in standing with the Palestinian people. We know that the struggle for justice is long and hard, but we also know that it is a fight worth fighting. The price of silence is too high, and the cost of inaction is too great. We must act now, and we must act decisively. The voices of the African people will no longer be silenced in the face of oppression. We will raise our voices. We will raise our hands and we will raise our hearts in solidarity with Palestine. Africa will stand firm and we will not rest until justice is served. The time for complacency has long passed. Israel's continued actions against the Palestinian people, without regard for international law or human dignity, have reached a breaking point. The world has watched as innocent lives have been taken, homes destroyed, and families torn apart under the weight of an illegal occupation. But no more. The era of unchecked aggression must end, and it is time for Israel to face the consequences of its action. Accountability is not a choice, it is a necessity. For decades, Israel has disregarded the principles enshrined in international law, from the Geneva Conventions to United Nations resolutions. Despite the clear and overwhelming evidence of violations, Israel has operated with impunity, confident that its actions will go unchecked by the international community. This cannot continue. The people of Palestine, who have suffered under occupation for generations, deserve justice, and they deserve it now. The world cannot continue to turn a blind eye to their suffering, while Israel builds settlements on their land, imprisons their youth, and uses military force against civilians. The principle of accountability is universal. No nation, no matter how powerful, should be allowed to act above the law. Israel must be held accountable for its actions. The United Nations must stop issuing empty resolutions that have no practical consequences. The international community must demand an end to the illegal settlements, the violations of Palestinian human rights, and the ongoing military occupation. It is time for countries around the world to stand together and take concrete actions that will force Israel to reckon with its violations. The people of Palestine have lived under this occupation for far too long. They have endured violence, displacement, and suffering without a meaningful end in sight. The world cannot afford to be silent any longer. The failure to hold Israel accountable for its actions sends a dangerous message that there is no real cost to violating human rights, that the lives of Palestinians do not matter, and that international law can be ignored by those who have the power to do so. This must change. The time for accountability has come, and Israel must face the consequences of its actions. Accountability means much more than words or resolutions that lack enforcement. It means holding Israel accountable through concrete actions, whether through diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, or international legal proceedings. The international community must use every tool at its disposal to compel Israel to change its behavior. The failure to act decisively in the past has only emboldened Israel, allowing it to continue its illegal practices without fear of reprisal. Sanctions and diplomatic pressure must be part of the strategy for bringing about accountability. Nations that continue to support Israel's actions must also face the consequences of their complicity. We cannot allow the politics of favoritism and power to dictate the fate of millions of people. The world must stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people, and that solidarity must be reflected in action. It is time for governments to stop shielding Israel from the consequences of its actions, and it is time for the international community to hold those responsible accountable. There is also a moral dimension to accountability. No nation can claim to stand for justice and human rights while allowing the systematic abuse of another people. Accountability also means ensuring that the victims of Israel's aggression are provided the means to rebuild their lives. The Palestinian people have suffered enough, and their suffering cannot be erased by words alone. The international community must commit to supporting the rebuilding of Gaza, the provision of aid to those displaced by Israel's actions, and the restoration of the basic human rights that have been stripped away. The right of return, the right to self-determination, and the right to live in peace must be recognized by all. But accountability is not just about addressing the present. It is about ensuring that history does not repeat itself. It is about ensuring that future generations of Palestinians do not have to endure the same suffering that their ancestors have endured. The international community must work to ensure that the principles of justice and human rights are respected, and that no nation, no matter how powerful, is allowed to act without consequences. This is the true meaning of accountability, ensuring that actions have consequences, and that the rule of law prevails over the interests of the powerful. For too long, Israel has acted without fear of consequence. For too long, the Palestinian people have been denied the right to live in peace. The world must stand up and demand that Israel be held accountable. We must demand an end to the occupation, an end to the violence, and an end to the denial of Palestinian rights. The time for action is now. The time for accountability is now. No longer can we sit by as Israel continues to act with impunity. The international community must take decisive steps to hold Israel accountable for its actions, and it must do so now. There will be consequences for continued aggression, and the world will not stand by while this continues. The struggle for justice in Palestine is not merely a regional issue. It is a global one. When we talk about the suffering of the Palestinian people, we are not just talking about a distant conflict in the Middle East. We are speaking about the violation of fundamental human rights, the denial of dignity, and the imposition of an unjust occupation that has far-reaching consequences for all of humanity. The struggle of the Palestinians is at its core a struggle for justice, for peace, and for the right to live free from oppression, and the world must recognize that this fight for freedom is not one that belongs only to Palestinians, it is one that belongs to all of us. As Africans, we have a long history of struggle for liberation, justice, and dignity. Our continent was shaped by the chains of colonialism, the horrors of apartheid, and the ongoing challenges of neo-imperialism. We understand better than most the power of solidarity, the strength that comes from standing together in the face of oppression. The African people have never shied away from standing up against injustice, whether on our own soil or in support of those facing oppression in distant lands. From our involvement in the anti-apartheid struggle to our continued support for movements of liberation across the globe, Africa has consistently shown that it will not stand by while people suffer. And so, our solidarity with the Palestinian people is not a mere political gesture. It is a moral imperative. The actions of Israel against the Palestinians, from the expansion of illegal settlements to the indiscriminate use of military force, are not just violations of international law, they are an assault on humanity itself. These are actions that not only affect the Palestinian people, but that shake the very foundation of the global order. When one people is oppressed and denied their rights, the entire world is diminished. This is why it is imperative that we as a global community come together and stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. The voices of the oppressed must not be ignored, and the world must unite to challenge the forces of injustice that continue to violate their rights. Solidarity is not just a passive feeling of support, it is an active commitment to change. It is the willingness to confront power, to challenge systems that perpetuate inequality and violence. The Palestinian people have long been denied their right to self-determination, their right to live in peace and security. This is a denial of their humanity, and we cannot stand by while this continues. Africa, along with other nations across the globe, must take a firm stand in support of the Palestinians. This support must go beyond rhetoric and manifest in real action. We must be willing to use our collective influence, diplomatically, economically, and socially, to hold Israel accountable for its action. It is no longer enough to issue statements of concern. We must demand that the occupation end, that the settlements cease, and that the rights of the Palestinian people be fully recognized. The unity of African nations in standing with Palestine is crucial. When we speak with one voice, we wield tremendous power. Africa has long been a continent that has been marginalized in the global political arena. But we are not powerless, and we will not allow ourselves to be ignored. As we unite in solidarity with the Palestinian people, we send a message to the world that the struggle for justice cannot be confined by borders. Our actions as a continent can resonate on the global stage, shifting the balance of power and demanding that justice be served. But Africa cannot do this alone. The support of other nations, especially those in the global south, is vital. We must form alliances with countries that share our values of justice, dignity, and human rights. The struggle for Palestinian rights is a struggle for global justice, and it must unite nations across the world in a common cause. From Latin America to Asia, from Europe to the Middle East, there are people and nations who share in the Palestinian cause. The global community must come together to challenge the forces that seek to oppress and silence the Palestinian people. The struggle for Palestine is a fight for the very soul of humanity, and if we are to succeed, we must stand united. The power of global solidarity is immense. We have seen this in the past, from the anti-apartheid movement to the fight for independence in many African nations. Solidarity, when organized and focused, has the power to change the course of history. The global movement for Palestinian rights must be no different. We must be resolute in our support for the Palestinian people and unwavering in our commitment to holding Israel accountable for its violations of international law. This is not just a political issue, it is a moral one, and it is a fight that the entire world must join. The consequences of inaction are grave. The continued oppression of the Palestinian people will not only result in further suffering, but it will also send a message to the world that human rights can be violated with impunity. This is a message that cannot be allowed to stand. The global community must unite to show that there are consequences for aggression, for occupation, and for the denial of human rights. By standing together in solidarity with the Palestinian people, we send a clear message that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This is a moment in history where the world must choose between complicity and solidarity, between maintaining the status quo and standing for justice. The Palestinian struggle is a test for the global community, a test of our commitment to human rights, to justice, and to peace. It is a test that we cannot afford to fail. The solidarity that we, as Africans and as people of the world, extend to Palestine must be rooted in action. We must demand an end to the occupation, an end to the settlements, and an end to the violence. We must use all the tools at our disposal: diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and the mobilization of public opinion to hold Israel accountable for its actions. The time for words has passed. The time for action is now. We as a global community must unite in our shared commitment to justice. The voices of the Palestinian people cannot be silenced. The world must stand with them, for their struggle is our struggle. Their fight for dignity is our fight for dignity. Their quest for justice is our quest for justice. The time to act is now, and the global movement toward justice, dignity, and peace must begin today. Together we will ensure that the Palestinian people are not left alone in their fight for freedom. Together we will ensure that justice prevails. History has taught us time and again that the true power of a nation, a people, or a movement is not found in its ability to wield military force or in the political games it plays on the world stage. True power comes from the strength of moral conviction, the unwavering belief that justice, human dignity, and peace are the fundamental rights of every human being, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, or religion. These values are non-negotiable. They cannot be bought, bargained for, or obliterated by the sheer force of arms or the manipulations of power. And no matter how much force is deployed, the reality remains unshakable. Justice will prevail. The time has come for Israel's leadership, particularly Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, to recognize this truth, and for the world to stand firm in defense of those values. The Palestinian people have suffered for far too long under the shadow of occupation and violence. They have endured decades of systemic injustice, military aggression, and the continued erosion of their basic human rights. And yet, despite all of this, their spirit has not been broken. The strength and resilience of the Palestinian people are a testament to the enduring power of moral conviction. They have fought not just for territory or political power, but for their inherent right to live in dignity and peace. And this is where true strength lies, in the ability to stand firm in the face of oppression, to hold on to your humanity and your values even when the world tries to tear them away. Netanyahu and his government may believe that they can force the Palestinian people into submission through military strikes, displacement, and the expansion of illegal settlements. They may think that they can break the will of an entire nation with weapons and violence. But history has shown us that such efforts are futile. No military campaign, no matter how brutal, can extinguish the desire for justice and freedom. The Palestinian people will not be crushed under the weight of bombs or occupied land. They will rise as they always have and continue to demand their rights. The true power of a nation lies in its ability to live in accordance with moral principles, to act in a way that reflects respect for human dignity. Military might can impose control, but it cannot create true peace. No matter how many homes are destroyed or how many lives are lost, the injustice faced by the Palestinian people will not disappear. The violence may temporarily suppress resistance, but it will never erase the fundamental truth that the Palestinian people have the right to self-determination, to live freely on their land, and to exist in a world where their rights are respected. The moral responsibility of the international community is clear. It is time for the world to stop enabling Israel's aggressive policies. No longer can we accept the narrative that Israel's security concerns justify the suffering of an entire population. The Palestinian people are not enemies to be destroyed. They are human beings, with hopes, dreams, and the fundamental right to live in peace. This is not a political game. This is about basic human dignity. And if we as a global community allow these injustices to continue unchecked, then we too are complicit in the erosion of the very principles that should define our world. When we talk about the moral responsibility of the international community, we are not speaking only about governments and institutions. We are speaking about every individual, every citizen of the world who believes in justice and human rights. The time for neutrality, for pretending that this is merely a regional dispute with no bearing on the broader world, has passed. The actions of Israel and the suffering of the Palestinian people affect all of us. The world is interconnected, and when one group of people is oppressed, it weakens the moral fabric of humanity as a whole. The values of justice, dignity, and peace that we claim to hold dear must be protected, not just by our words, but by our action. In the face of such a clear violation of those values, the world must stand with the oppressed, not the oppressed. Israel's disregard for international law and its continued violations of Palestinian rights are a stain on the conscience of the world. These actions cannot be allowed to go unchallenged. It is not enough to simply condemn Israel's actions or to issue statements of concern. The international community must take concrete steps to hold Israel accountable for its crimes. This means imposing sanctions, supporting international legal actions, and using every available tool to demand an end to the occupation and the violations of Palestinian rights. But it also means standing firm in the belief that no amount of force or political maneuvering can alter the fundamental truth, that justice, peace, and human dignity are non-negotiable. In the face of Netanyahu's continued aggression, we must remember that moral power will always outweigh military might. No matter how many bombs are dropped or how many lives are lost, the moral conviction of the Palestinian people will endure. The world must not allow Israel to rewrite the narrative of this struggle. This is not a battle for land alone. It is a battle for the soul of humanity. The Palestinian people are fighting for their basic rights, their right to live in peace, and their right to live with dignity. And these are rights that no government, no matter how powerful, can take away. They are inalienable. It is crucial that Netanyahu and the Israeli government understand that the world is watching. The international community is no longer willing to turn a blind eye to the injustices taking place in Palestine. No amount of political maneuvering, no matter how cunning, can change the reality that the Palestinian people are entitled to their rights and freedoms. The violence Israel has inflicted upon them cannot be justified by the mere rhetoric of security concern. It is a violation of basic human principles, and it must be stopped. The power of moral conviction cannot be underestimated. It is what has sustained the Palestinian people through decades of suffering, and it is what will ultimately bring about their freedom. The world must stand with them, not because it is politically convenient, but because it is the right thing to do. When we choose to stand with justice, with peace, and with human dignity, we are not just supporting the Palestinian cause, we are reaffirming our commitment to the fundamental principles that must guide us all. Netanyahu must understand that no amount of force, no amount of political manipulation can change the reality that justice is on the side of the Palestinian people. They will continue to fight for their rights, and the world must stand with them in this fight. This is not a call for mere sympathy or passive support. This is a call for active solidarity, for the moral strength to stand against injustice wherever it is found. The time has come for the international community to stop looking the other way and to act in defense of the rights of the Palestinian people. True power lies in the strength of our moral convictions, and the power of justice will always overcome the power of force. The time for reckoning is now. Israel has reached a crossroads, a pivotal moment where it must decide whether it will continue down a path of aggression and division, or choose the more difficult but ultimately more rewarding path of peace, respect, and justice. The current trajectory is one of isolation, destruction, and the deepening of suffering for both Palestinians and Israelis alike. This path is unsustainable. It leads only to further conflict, further loss of life, and an even greater disconnection from the global community. The world is watching and the Palestinian people are waiting. They have waited for far too long. But they are not without hope. They are waiting for Israel to show a true commitment to peace, a commitment that must be grounded in dialogue, mutual respect, and the recognition of the basic rights of all people, including the Palestinians. This is not just a plea for peace. It is a demand for justice. Peace cannot exist in a vacuum where one people's rights are denied and another's are imposed through force. True peace is built on equality, on the recognition of the humanity of every individual, and on the belief that the rights of one group cannot be sacrificed for the benefit of another. The Israeli government must understand that peace is not a one-sided affair. It is a mutual commitment, a recognition that the rights of the Palestinian people are just as important as the security concerns of Israel. Until Israel recognizes this fundamental truth, peace will remain an illusion. The road Israel has chosen, one of continued occupation, settlement expansion, and the use of military force, is a road that leads to more violence, more hatred, and more division. It is a road that isolates Israel from the international community, as more and more nations recognize the injustice of its actions. The world cannot continue to stand by as Israel continues to trample on the rights of the Palestinian people. And Israel must understand that its actions have consequences. The support that Israel has enjoyed from certain corners of the world is not infinite. The longer Israel continues down this path, the more it will find itself without friends and allies, standing alone in the face of a global call for justice. This is a reality that Israel must confront. It cannot continue to act with impunity, believing that it can disregard international law and the human rights of others without facing repercussion. This is the last chance for Israel to reconsider its course. The window for peace is not closed, but it is narrowing. The international community has made it clear that it will no longer tolerate the continued oppression of the Palestinian people. More nations are recognizing the need for a just solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the pressure on Israel to change its policies is growing. But this change will not come easily, and it will not come through coercion or force. It will come through a sincere commitment to dialogue, to peace, and to respect for the rights of all people. Israel must understand that dialogue is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. It takes great courage and wisdom to open oneself up to the possibility of change, to acknowledge that the path we are on is not working, and to be willing to take a new direction. Dialogue does not mean giving up on one's own security or interests. It means finding a way to balance those interests with the need for justice, for peace, and for respect for the rights of others. Israel must engage in this dialogue with the Palestinian people not as a concession but as a recognition of their legitimate aspirations for freedom and self-determination. Respect for the Palestinian people is not negotiable. For too long, their voices have been silenced, their lands occupied, and their lives controlled by an occupying force. The recognition of their basic rights, freedom of movement, the right to live on their own land, the right to determine their own future, must be a fundamental part of any peace process. Without this recognition, no agreement will hold and no peace will last. Israel must understand that peace is not about achieving a temporary ceasefire or securing its own borders at the expense of Palestinian lives and rights. It is about finding a way to coexist peacefully, where both peoples can live in dignity, security, and freedom. This is not an impossible goal. It is a necessary one. The time has come for Israel to acknowledge that the status quo is untenable, and that true peace will only come when both Palestinians and Israelis are afforded their fundamental rights. The path to peace is not easy, and it will not come without struggle. There will be difficult conversations, painful compromises, and the breaking of long-standing barriers. But this is the price of peace: the willingness to engage, to listen, and to make the difficult decisions that will lead to a better future for all. Israel must show the courage to take this step, to leave behind the path of violence and oppression, and to embrace the path of peace. But peace will not be achieved solely by Israel changing its course. The international community has a moral responsibility to play its part. The United Nations, the European Union, and all nations committed to justice and human rights must stand firm in demanding that Israel stop its aggression and respect the rights of the Palestinian people. This is not just a regional issue, it is a global issue. The oppression of the Palestinian people affects us all, and the world must stand in solidarity with them. It is time for the global community to stop making excuses for Israel's actions and to hold it accountable for the suffering it has caused. The world cannot continue to look the other way while the Palestinian people are denied their basic rights. The path to peace will require a united effort from all parties involved. It will require Israel to reconsider its policies, to halt the expansion of settlements, and to end the occupation. It will require the Palestinian leadership to engage in meaningful negotiations, to recognize the security concerns of Israel, and to work toward a two-state solution that respects the rights and dignity of both people. And it will require the international community to support these efforts, to hold both sides accountable, and to ensure that the peace process is based on justice and respect for human rights. This is the last chance for Israel to change course. If it continues down its current path, it will find itself further isolated, more entrenched in its occupation, and more distant from the possibility of a just peace. The world will no longer accept the continued suffering of the Palestinian people, and Israel will not be able to escape the consequences of its action. But peace is still possible, and it can only be achieved through dialogue, respect, and a sincere commitment to the recognition of the rights of all people, including the Palestinians. This is the path that must be taken if we are to avoid more years of violence and suffering. The choice is Israel's, but the world is watching. The time for peace is now, and it will be achieved through courage, dialogue, and a firm commitment to justice.